Have you ever wondered what it would be like to have it all? I mean, truly have everything you could possibly desire. Unlimited wealth, unmatched wisdom, and the power to build anything you can imagine. Today, we're diving into the incredible, and ultimately cautionary, tale of a man who reached that pinnacle, King Solomon. He was a figure of legend, a king whose name is synonymous with wisdom and riches. But his story is also a powerful reminder that having everything isn't always enough. It's a journey from unparalleled glory to profound regret, and it holds lessons that are just as relevant for us today as they were thousands of years ago. So, who was Solomon? He was the son of the famous King David, and when he took the throne, he had a very humble request for God. He didn't ask for long life, or riches, or victory over his enemies. Instead, he asked for a discerning heart, for wisdom to govern his people justly. And because his request was so selfless, God not only granted him wisdom beyond compare, but also promised him riches and honor that no king before or after would ever match, and boy, did that promise come true. Solomon's reign was the golden age of ancient Israel. His wisdom was legendary. People came from all over the world just to hear him speak and seek his counsel, including the famous Queen of Sheba. She arrived with a massive caravan, testing him with hard questions, and was left breathless by his intellect and the sheer magnificence of his kingdom. He wasn't just smart, he was incredibly wealthy. We're talking about an income of over 25 tons of gold every single year, not counting trade and tributes. His palace was a masterpiece of architecture, and his crowning achievement was the construction of the first temple in Jerusalem, a breathtaking structure that took 7 years to build and was a wonder of the ancient world. He had it all: the wisdom, the wealth, the power. He was at the absolute peak of human success. But this is where the story takes a turn. Despite all his God-given wisdom, Solomon began to make some questionable choices. He amassed a huge number of foreign wives and concubines, over 1,000 in total. Now, these weren't just for personal pleasure. Many were political alliances, but there was a huge problem. These women brought their own gods and religious practices with them, and slowly but surely, to please his wives, Solomon began to build temples and altars to these foreign gods, right there in the land that was supposed to be dedicated to one God alone. His heart, once so devoted, started to drift. He, the wisest man on earth, began to do the very thing he was warned against. He allowed his affections and his political ambitions to lead him astray from his core principles. The consequences were severe. The very kingdom he had built to such glorious heights began to crumble from within. His actions led to divine judgment, and the once unified nation was prophesied to be torn in two after his death. The end of his life wasn't a celebration of his achievements, but a period of turmoil and rebellion. It's a tragic end to such a promising start. Later in life, Solomon is believed to have written the book of Ecclesiastes, a profound and somewhat cynical reflection on his life. His conclusion, after experiencing every pleasure and achievement imaginable: meaningless, meaningless, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. He had chased after every worldly desire, wealth, power, pleasure, knowledge, only to find them all to be empty in the end. He learned the hard way that a life without a deeper purpose, without a connection to the divine, is ultimately unfulfilling, no matter how much you accumulate. So, what can we learn from Solomon? His life is a powerful lesson in humility and priorities. It teaches us that true wisdom isn't just about knowing things. It's about living out what you know to be right. It shows that even the smartest and most successful among us can fall if we lose sight of our values. Solomon's story isn't just an ancient tale. It's a mirror for our own lives. reminding us to constantly check our own hearts and ask ourselves what we are truly chasing after. Is it fleeting pleasures and material wealth, or something more lasting and meaningful? Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most fascinating figures. See you in the next video. Have you ever imagined what it would be like to be born into a royal family? Not just any royal family, but one at the absolute peak of its power and glory. Imagine growing up in a palace where every wall tells a story of victory. Every corridor echoes with songs of praise, and your father is a living legend, a hero king loved by his people. This isn't a fairy tale. This was the world of a young prince named Solomon. He was the son of King David, the shepherd boy who became a giant slayer and the unifier of a nation. By the time Solomon was born, the days of struggle were long gone. The kingdom was secure, prosperous, and at peace. For Solomon, life wasn't about fighting for survival. It was about living in the abundance his father had won. Picture this, waking up not to the sound of an alarm, but to the gentle strumming of a harp. Your clothes aren't just fabric, they're woven with the finest threads and dyed in the richest colors imaginable. Your meals are feasts, with delicacies brought in from every corner of the known world. Your playground isn't a small backyard. It's the sprawling, magnificent city of Jerusalem, a city your father built into a capital of global renown. As a prince, Solomon's education was second to none. He would have studied under the wisest tutors, learning history, law, poetry, and statecraft. He'd sit at his father's feet, listening to stories of God's faithfulness, of epic battles, and of the heavy responsibility that comes with wearing a crown. David, now an old and revered king, would have looked at his gifted son and seen the future of his dynasty. Solomon wasn't just another prince. He was special. The scriptures say he was deeply loved, not only by his parents but also by God. From a young age, there was something different about hammer sharpness, a curiosity and a wisdom that seemed far beyond his years. While other children played with simple toys, Solomon was likely observing the intricate workings of the royal court, absorbing every detail and learning the complex dance of power and politics. He grew up surrounded by wealth that most of us can't even fathom. Gold wasn't just for jewelry. It was a building material. The air was filled with the scent of exotic spices and incense. Every day was a display of national strength and divine blessing. This was Solomon's normal. This life of incredible privilege was the starting point for a man who would one day become the wisest and wealthiest king the world had ever known. But here's the fascinating question: does being born with everything guarantee a life of happiness and fulfillment? Solomon's early years set the stage for an incredible story, a journey that would take him from the heights of wisdom and glory to the depths of confusion and regret. His story is a powerful lesson that true contentment isn't found in what you have, but in something much, much deeper. And his journey is just getting started. If you're intrigued by this story of a prince born in the shadow of a legend, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. We're about to dive deep into the life of King Solomon, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Thanks for watching. Hey everyone, and welcome back. We've journeyed through the rise and fall of this incredible figure, and now we arrive at the big question, the one that historians and philosophers have debated for centuries. Was their life ultimately great, or was it tragic? Let's start with the case for greatness. Think about it. They completely reshaped the world as they knew it. Their innovations, their leadership, their sheer force of will changed the course of history. Millions, if not billions, of lives today are different because of the path they carved. Their name is etched into our collective memory, synonymous with power, ambition, and achievement. They built an empire, not just of land, but of ideas. That legacy, that undeniable impact, is a powerful argument for greatness. They dreamed bigger than anyone else and, for a time, made those dreams a reality. How can that be anything but great? But then, we have to look at the other side of the coin. The tragedy. What was the cost of all that greatness? We saw the personal sacrifices, the broken relationships, the loneliness that often accompanies a crown. They gained the world, but what did they lose in the process? Think of the immense suffering left in the wake of their ambition, the wars, the shattered lives, the destruction, and ultimately, look at how it all ended. Their grand vision crumbled, their power faded, and they were left with the ghosts of their past. Is a life that ends in ruin, despite its soaring heights, a tragic one? It's like a brilliant star that burns twice as bright but half as long, collapsing into darkness. So, where do we land? It's tempting to pick a side, to label them a hero or a villain, a success or a failure. But maybe the real answer is that they were both. Perhaps true greatness is inherently tied to tragedy. To achieve something extraordinary, you might have to risk losing everything. Their story isn't a simple fable with a clear moral. It's a complex, messy, and deeply human drama. It shows us the dazzling heights a person can reach and the devastating depths they can fall to. What do you think? Was their life a monument to human potential, or a cautionary tale about the price of ambition? There's no single right answer, and that's what makes their story so captivating and timeless. It forces us to ask ourselves what we value most: victory or virtue, legacy or love. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear your take on this. Thanks so much for watching and exploring this question with me. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like and subscribe for more. See you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back. In our last session, we saw David on his deathbed, setting the stage for his successor. Today, we're re-diving into one of the most fascinating periods in ancient history, the rise of King Solomon. This isn't just a story of a new king taking the throne. It's the dawn of an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity. So, David has passed, and Solomon, his son with Bathsheba, is now the undisputed king. Imagine the pressure on this young man. He's following in the footsteps of a legendary warrior king, a giant of history. What's the first thing he does? He goes to Gibeon, the most important high place, to offer sacrifices. He offers 1,000 burnt offerings. This was a massive, public declaration of his devotion. And then, something extraordinary happens. That night, God appears to Solomon in a dream. God says to him, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Now, let's just pause here for a second. What would you ask for? Riches, long life, victory over your enemies. Solomon could have asked for anything, but what he asks for reveals everything about the man he is destined to become. He doesn't ask for personal gain. Instead, he says, "Give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong." He asks for wisdom. He recognizes the immense responsibility of ruling and feels his own inadequacy. He wants, more than anything, to be a good and just king for his people. God is so pleased with this request, because Solomon didn't ask for wealth or power or a long life for himself. God promises to give him not only what he asked for, a wise and discerning heart, unlike anyone before or after him, but also what he didn't ask for. God promises him riches and honor, so much so that no other king would be his equal. The only condition was that Solomon must walk in God's ways and keep his commands, just as his father David had. This divine encounter sets the stage for everything that follows. Solomon returns to Jerusalem, stands before the Ark of the Covenant, and his reign truly begins. And the first test of his newfound wisdom comes almost immediately. You've probably heard this story. Two women come before the king, both living in the same house, both having recently given birth. One of their babies had died in the night. Now, both women claim the living child is theirs. There are no witnesses. It's one woman's word against the other. How do you find the truth in a situation like this? This is where Solomon's genius shines. He listens to both sides. Then, he calls for a sword and orders the living child to be cut in two, with each woman receiving a half. It's a shocking, brutal command. But Solomon isn't looking for a solution. He's looking for a reaction. The first woman, the one whose son had died, says, "Yes, cut him in two. That way, neither of us will have him." But the second woman, the true mother, is horrified. She cries out, "Please, my lord, give her the living baby. Don't kill him." Her love for her child, her willingness to give him up just to save his life, reveals the truth. Solomon immediately points to her and says, "Give the living baby to her. She is his mother." When the people of Israel heard about this judgment, they were filled with awe. They saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice. This single act cemented his reputation. The news spread like wildfire. A new kind of king sat on the throne, a king of unparalleled wisdom. This wisdom wasn't just for dramatic court cases. It became the foundation of his entire reign. Solomon's ability to judge, to organize, and to lead ushered in an age of peace and prosperity that the nation had never known. The kingdom was secure, its borders were peaceful, and under Solomon's wise administration, it began to flourish. This was the golden age, and it was all built on a young king's humble prayer for a discerning heart. And that's where we'll leave it for today. We've seen Solomon receive his power and demonstrate his divine wisdom. Next time, we'll explore how this wisdom transformed the nation into a wealthy and powerful empire. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next part of our story. See you then. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a topic that's crucial for anyone trying to build something amazing. Whether it's a business, a creative project, or even a personal goal. We all love a good success story, but what about the stories that don't have a happy ending? What happens when things go wrong? It's easy to get caught up in the highlights and the wins, but understanding the pitfalls, the mistakes, and the warning signs is just as important, if not more so. So, in this video, we go in to peel back the curtain and look at some classic examples of projects that started with huge promise but ended up derailing. We'll analyze what went wrong, what lessons we can learn, and how you can spot these red flags in your own journey before it's too late. Think of this as your guide to navigating the tough times, a roadmap for what not to do. By understanding failure, we can build a much stronger foundation for success. Ready to learn from the mistakes of others so you don't have to repeat them. Let's get into it. First up, let's talk about the classic case of ignoring your audience. Imagine a company that spent millions developing a revolutionary new product. They had the best engineers, the slickest marketing, and a launch plan that was perfect on paper. But they missed one critical step. They never actually asked their potential customers what they wanted. They were so convinced their idea was brilliant that they built it in a vacuum. When the product finally launched, the response was crickets. It was a technical marvel, but it solved a problem nobody had. The lesson here is simple but powerful. You are not your customer. It's so easy to fall in love with your own ideas, but you have to validate them with real people. Talk to your audience, run surveys, create prototypes, and get feedback early and often. Do you and wait until UVA invested all your time and money to find out UVA built something nobody needs. That initial feedback loop is your best defense against failure. Next, let's look at a different kind of disaster. The failure to adapt. Think of a brand that was once at the top of its game, a household name. They had a winning formula, and for years, it worked flawlessly. But then, the world started to change. New technologies emerged, consumer tastes shifted, and competitors started doing things differently. Instead of evolving, this company doubled down on what they'd always done. They thought their brand was too big to fail. They saw the new trends as fads that would pass. But they didn't pass. Slowly but surely, their market share eroded, and they became a shadow of their former selves. The warning here is that past success doesn't guarantee future success. You have to stay curious, keep learning, and be willing to pivot. The moment you think you've got it all figured out is the moment you become vulnerable. Always be watching your industry, listening to the market, and asking yourself, what's next? Don't be afraid to change a winning formula if the game itself is changing. Another major reason things go south is what I like to call growth at all costs. This happens when a project or company scales too quickly without the right foundation in place. They chase vanity metrics like follower counts or user sign-ups, but they neglect the core of the business. Customer service starts to slip, product quality declines, and the internal culture becomes chaotic. On the outside, everything looks amazing there, the talk of the town. But on the inside, the whole thing is a house of cards, ready to collapse. They're burning through cash and people, all for the sake of looking successful. The cautionary tale here is to focus on sustainable, healthy growth. Build strong systems, invest in your team, and never sacrifice your core values for a short-term win. It's better to grow slowly and steadily than to have a spectacular explosion that leaves nothing but wreckage behind. Make sure your operations can actually support the growth you're chasing. Finally, let's dissect the most painful failure of all: a breakdown in team dynamics. You can have the best idea in the world, a massive budget, and a hungry market. But if your team can't work together, you are doomed. This often starts with a lack of clear communication, undefined roles, or a toxic culture where ego and politics rule the day. People start working in silos, resentment builds, and trust completely disappears. Instead of collaborating to solve problems, the team starts blaming each other when things go wrong. The project grinds to a halt not because of an external threat, but because of internal conflict. The crucial lesson is that who you work with is just as important as what you're reworking on. You must build a culture of trust, respect, and open communication from day one. Define roles clearly, set shared goals, and deal with conflicts head-on before they fester. A brilliant team with a good idea will always beat a team of brilliant individuals who and cooperate. So, what can we take away from all this? Failure is rarely about one single catastrophic event. It's usually a series of small, unaddressed problems that snowball over time. It's ignoring your customers, refusing to adapt, growing too fast, and letting your team culture fall apart. By studying these patterns, you can become much better at spotting them in your own work. Don't be afraid to ask the tough questions and have those difficult conversations. Remember, every failure contains a valuable lesson, and learning from the mistakes of others is the cheapest education you can get. I hope this look at the dark side of making things has been helpful for you. Let me know in the comments which of these pitfalls you've seen before, or what other warning signs you think are important. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content to help you build better. See you in the next one. Have you ever made a mistake you wish you could undo? A choice that spiraled out of control, changing everything? We often think of our heroes as flawless, perfect figures. But the truth is, even the greatest among them have their moments of weakness, their dark chapters. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the most famous and cautionary tales ever told. We're diving into the story of King David, a man described as being after God's own heart, and the scandal that nearly cost him everything: his affair with Bathsheba. This isn't just an ancient story. It's a deeply human drama filled with power, desire, deception, and ultimately, consequences. It asks us some really tough questions. How can someone so celebrated, so blessed, fall so far? What happens when a leader abuses their power for personal gain? And what does redemption look like when the damage is done? Let's set the scene. It's springtime in ancient Jerusalem, the time when kings go off to war. But this year, King David decides to stay behind. He's at the height of his power, his kingdom is secure, and perhaps a sense of complacency has set in. One evening, while walking on the roof of his palace, he looks out over the city, and that's when he sees her, a beautiful woman named Bathsheba, bathing. In that moment, David makes a choice. Instead of turning away, he lets his gaze linger. He doesn't just look, he desires. This is the critical turning point. He could have stopped right there. He could have walked away, but he didn't. He sent his messengers to find out who she was. They came back with the information. She is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Uriah, one of David's own loyal soldiers, a man who was away fighting David's battles. The warning signs were all there. She was married. Her husband was one of his most faithful men. But David's desire overruled his conscience. He sends for her. He uses his authority as king to bring her to the palace. The narrative is concise, almost brutally so. It simply says he lay with her, and she returned to her home. A secret transgression, hidden behind the walls of the palace. Or so he thought. But secrets have a way of coming to light. Soon after, Bathsheba sends a message back to the king. A message with 4 simple but terrifying words: "I am with child." Suddenly, David's private sin is about to become a public scandal. Panic sets in. His first instinct isn't to confess or seek forgiveness, it's to cover it up. His mind races, trying to find a way to hide his wrongdoing. His first plan seems simple enough. Bring Bathsheba's husband, Uriah, back from the front lines. The idea is that Uriah will go home to his wife, and when the child is born, everyone will assume it's his. David summons Uriah, asks him about the war to keep up appearances, and then tells him, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." Essentially, go home, relax, be with your wife. But Uriah is a man of incredible integrity and honor. He cut and bring himself to enjoy the comforts of home, while his comrades are still in the field, sleeping in tents and facing the enemy. So, instead of going to his own house, Uriah sleeps at the entrance of the king's palace with the royal servants. When David hears this the next morning, his plan is foiled. He confronts Uriah, asking why he didn't go home. Uriah's response is a powerful indictment of David's own behavior, even if he doesn't realize it. He says, "The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and be with my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing." Uriah's loyalty and sense of duty stand in stark contrast to David's self-indulgence and deception. David's desperation grows. He tries again. He invites Uriah to eat and drink with him, getting him drunk, hoping that in his inebriated state, Uriah will stumble home to his wife. But even then, Uriah's honor holds firm. He again goes and sleeps with the king's servants. The cover-up has failed. This is where the story takes its darkest turn. Backed into a corner, David moves from deception to something far more sinister. He writes a letter, seals it, and gives it to Uriah to deliver. Uriah, the loyal soldier, becomes the carrier of his own death warrant. The letter is addressed to Joab, the army commander, and its instructions are chillingly clear. Put Uriah out in front, where the fighting is fiercest, then withdraw from him so he will be struck down and die. Joab follows the king's orders. He places Uriah in a position of extreme danger during the siege of a city, and just as David planned, Uriah is killed in battle. To make it look less like a targeted assassination, other soldiers die with him. The news is sent back to David. When the messenger reports Uriah's death, David's response is cold and calculated, feigning a sense of grim acceptance. The sword devours one as well as another. The deed is done. The obstacle, Uriah, is removed. When Bathsheba hears her husband is dead, she mourns for him. And after the customary period of mourning is over, David brings her to the palace, and she becomes his wife. The child is born. From the outside, it might look like the king simply took pity on a war widow. The secret seems safe. The scandal is contained. David got what he wanted. But the story doesn't end there. The final sentence of this chapter hangs in the air with ominous weight. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. David may have fooled everyone around him, but he couldn't fool God. His attempt to hide his sin only led him deeper into darkness, from lust to adultery, to deception, and finally, to murder. It's a sobering reminder that our actions, especially those done in secret, have consequences that ripple outwards, often in ways we can't control. The stage is now set for a dramatic confrontation, one that will force David to face the man he has become. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. This story is just getting started, and the fallout is immense. If you found this exploration meaningful, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more. We'll continue this journey next time. See you then. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our series where we dive deep into some of the most dramatic and impactful stories ever told. Today, we're tackling a story that's filled with passion, power, betrayal, and ultimately, a profound lesson. We're talking about King David, a man often described as being after God's own heart. And the moment his life took a dark and complicated turn. This is the story of David and Bathsheba. To really understand the weight of this event, we need to remember who David was at this point. He wasn't just some king. He was the king. He had gone from a humble shepherd boy to a giant-slaying hero, and then to the celebrated ruler of Israel. His life was a testament to faith, courage, and divine favor. The people loved him, and he had consolidated his kingdom, bringing peace and prosperity. He was at the absolute peak of his power, a living legend. It's from this incredible height that his fall becomes so shocking and so tragic. The story begins on a warm evening in Jerusalem. It's springtime, a time when kings typically go off to war. But David, for some reason, decides to stay behind in his palace while his army, led by his general Joab, is out besieging a city. One evening, unable to sleep, David takes a walk on the roof of his palace. From this high vantage point, he can see into the courtyards of the homes below, and that's when he sees her. He sees a woman of incredible beauty bathing. This woman is Bathsheba. Now, David could have looked away. He could have gone back inside, respected her privacy, and moved on with his night. But he didn't. Instead, he was captivated. This is where the first major misstep happens. He allows his gaze to linger, and that gaze turns into lust. He doesn't just admire her from a distance. He feels a powerful desire to possess her. Driven by this impulse, He sends a messenger to find out who she is. The messenger returns with a crucial piece of information. She is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Notice that she is the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Uriah was not just some random citizen. He was one of David's most loyal and elite soldiers, a man who was at that very moment on the front lines, fighting and risking his life for his king and his country. This information should have been a massive stop sign for David, but his desire had now clouded his judgment completely. Ignoring all moral and ethical boundaries, David sends for Bathsheba. She is brought to the palace, and he sleeps with her. It's a staggering abuse of power. He's a king, using his authority to satisfy a personal desire, regardless of the consequences for others. Soon after, a message arrives for David from Bathsheba, and it contains just 5 words that change everything. I am with child. Suddenly, David's private sin is about to become a public scandal. He's facing a crisis. Instead of confessing and seeking forgiveness, David's mind immediately shifts to cover-up mode. He thinks if he can just get Uriah to come home from the battle and spend a night with his wife, everyone will assume the child is Uriah. It's a deceptive and manipulative plan. So, he summons Uriah from the battlefield under the pretense of getting a war report. Uriah, the loyal soldier, comes at once. David asks him about the war, about the general, about the troops, and then tells him, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." It was a subtle way of saying, "Go home, relax, and be with your wife." David even sends a gift of food after him to encourage the romantic reunion. But Uriah doesn't go home. Instead, he sleeps at the entrance to the palace with the king's servants. When David finds out, he's stunned. He asks Uriah, "Why didn't you go home?" And Uriah's response is one of the most honorable and heartbreaking speeches in the entire narrative. He says, "The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and be with my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing." Uriah's integrity, his loyalty to his comrades, and his duty, stands in stark contrast to David's selfishness. He is so honorable, he can't even comprehend taking personal comfort while his friends are at war. David's first plan has failed, so he tries again. He invites Uriah to eat and drink with him, and he gets him drunk, hoping that in his drunken state, Uriah will stumble home to his wife. But even then, Uriah's sense of duty holds firm. He again goes and sleeps with the king's servants. David's desperation grows. The cover-up is failing, and his sin is on the verge of being exposed. This is where the story takes its darkest turn. David moves from lust and deception to cold-blooded murder. He writes a letter, seals it, and gives it to Uriah to carry. Think about that for a moment. He makes Uriah the messenger of his own death warrant. The letter is addressed to his general, Joab, and the instructions are chillingly clear: put Uriah out in front where the fighting is fiercest. Then withdraw from him so he will be struck down and die. Joab, ever the loyal but morally flexible servant to his king, follows the orders. He places Uriah in a position of extreme danger during the siege. And just as David planned, Uriah the Hittite is killed in battle. To make the act seem less targeted, several other soldiers die with him. When the news reaches David, he sends a message back to Joab, telling him not to worry, saying the sword devours one as well as another. He's trying to normalize the death, to treat it as just another casualty of war. With Uriah gone, David waits for Bathsheba's period of mourning to end. And then he brings her into his house, and she becomes his wife. On the surface, it looks like the king is graciously taking in the widow of a fallen hero. The cover-up appears complete. David thinks he's gotten away with it. But the final sentence of this part of the story is the most important. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. David may have fooled the people, but he couldn't fool God. His descent was complete from a man of God to a man who let lust lead him to adultery, deception, and murder. It sets a powerful warning about how unchecked desire and the abuse of power can corrupt even the best of us. But this isn't the end of the story. The consequences are coming, and they will be severe, reshaping David's life and his kingdom forever. We'll explore that next time. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this story as compelling as I do, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit hello everyone, and welcome back to our series. Today, we're re-diving into one of the most powerful and confrontational moments in the entire story of King David. It's a moment of truth, a reckoning that changes everything. We've followed David's journey from a shepherd boy to a king. We've seen his triumphs and his faith, but we've also just witnessed his darkest hour, his affair with Bathsheba and the subsequent murder of her husband, Uriah the Hittite. For about a year, it seems like David has gotten away with it. Life in the palace continues. A child is born, and the king's terrible secret remains hidden from the public eye. But one person knows, God knows. And he is not silent, so God sends the prophet Nathan to David. Now, imagine this scene. Nathan is a trusted advisor, a spiritual guide to the king. He doesn't just storm into the throne room, pointing a finger. Instead, he uses a brilliant and devastatingly effective method. He tells a story. He approaches David and says, "There were two men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little away lamb he had bought. He raised it, and it grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him." You can picture David listening intently. As a former shepherd, this story would resonate deeply with him. He understands the bond between a shepherd and his flock, especially a single, cherished lamb. Nathan continues, "Now a traveler came to the rich man. But the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the away lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him." As Nathan finishes the story, David is furious. His sense of justice, a quality that had defined much of his early reign, erupts. He declares, "As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over, because he did this thing and had no pity." And then, in that moment, with David's own judgment hanging in the air, Nathan delivers the blow. He looks the king straight in the eye and says those bone-chilling words, "You are the man." The story wasn't just a story. It was a mirror. The rich man with his many flocks was David, who had many wives and concubines. The poor man was Uriah, who had only one wife, Bathsheba, and the traveler, perhaps it was David's own lust, a guest he entertained at the expense of another man's entire world. In that instant, the walls David had built around his secret come crashing down. There's no more hiding, no more pretending. He is exposed, not by a political rival or an enemy army, but by a simple, heartbreaking story and the prophet of God. Nathan then lays out God's judgment directly. He reminds David of everything God has done for him, anointing him king, delivering him from Saul, giving him the house of Israel and Judah, and then he asks the piercing question, "Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes?" God's judgment is severe. The sword will never depart from David's house. Calamity will be raised up against him from his own household. The very evil he did in secret will be done to him in broad daylight, for all of Israel to see. This is the law of the harvest. You reap what you sow. David's sin, born in secrecy and darkness, will now bear its fruit in public shame and generational conflict. But here's the crucial turning point. Faced with this raw, unfiltered truth, David doesn't make excuses. He doesn't try to justify his actions or punish the messenger. Instead, he offers one of the most profound confessions in history. He simply says to Nathan, "I have sinned against the Lord." It's a moment of complete brokenness and surrender. And in response, Nathan tells him, "The Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die. However, the consequences remain. The child born to him and Bathsheba will die." This part is incredibly painful, but it underscores a vital principle. Forgiveness doesn't always erase the consequences. David is forgiven. His relationship with God can be restored, but the scars of his actions will remain, affecting his family and his kingdom for years to come. This story is a powerful reminder that no one is above accountability, and that true repentance begins with confronting the truth, no matter how painful it is. Thank you so much for joining me today for this intense part of David's story. It's a somber lesson, but one filled with important truths about sin, consequence, and the possibility of repentance. If you found this meaningful, please give the video a like and subscribe for more. We'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome back to our journey through Exodus. Today, we arrive at a pivotal and deeply somber moment in the story. The 10th and final plague, the death of the firstborn. This isn't just a historical event. It's a profound lesson about consequences, obedience, and the ultimate price of sin. After 9 devastating plagues, Pharaoh's heart remained as hard as stone. He refused to let the Israelites go. So, a final, heart-wrenching judgment was declared. God announced that at midnight he would pass through Egypt, and the firstborn in every household, from the heir of Pharaoh to the firstborn of the lowest servant, and even the firstborn of the livestock, would die. Imagine the atmosphere in Egypt that night. Fear and dread must have hung heavy in the air, but for the Israelites, there was a way to be saved. God provided specific, crucial instructions. Each family was to take a perfect, year-old male lamb without any defect. They were to slaughter it at twilight and, using a hyssop branch, apply its blood to the 2 doorposts and the lintel of their homes. This blood was a sign. When the angel of death passed through the land, he would see the blood and pass over that house, sparing those inside. This act of obedience was everything. It wasn't just about the blood, it was about faith. It was about trusting in God's provision for salvation. Inside their homes, the Israelites were to roast the lamb and eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They were to eat it in haste, fully dressed and ready to leave at a moment's notice. This meal wasn't just for nourishment. It was a sacred observance, the very first Passover, a memorial to be kept for all generations. It symbolized their imminent departure from bondage into freedom. Then, as promised, at the stroke of midnight, a great cry echoed throughout the land of Egypt. There was not a house among the Egyptians where someone was not dead. The consequence of Pharaoh's relentless defiance had come to pass in the most tragic way imaginable. The pain was immense, universal, and immediate. In his grief and terror, Pharaoh finally broke. He summoned Moses and Aaron in the middle of the night and commanded them to take their people and leave immediately. This event is heavy, and it's meant to be. It starkly illustrates the gravity of sin and disobedience. Pharaoh's pride led to unimaginable suffering for his entire nation. But, in the midst of this darkness, there's a powerful light of hope. The blood of the Lamb provided protection and salvation. For those who trusted and obeyed, there was a way out. This story points us toward a greater truth. The Passover lamb is a powerful foreshadowing of Jesus Christ, who the New Testament calls the Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world. Just as the blood of the lamb saved the Israelites from physical death, the sacrifice of Jesus offers us salvation from spiritual death. It's a reminder that while the consequences of sin are real and severe, God has always provided a path to redemption through faith. The death of the firstborn wasn't an arbitrary act of cruelty. It was the final, devastating result of a long chain of rebellion and a solemn demonstration of God's justice. But it also beautifully set the stage for the greatest act of mercy, the exodus of God's people from slavery into the freedom of the promised land. Thank you for joining me for this heavy but crucial part of the story. It teaches us so much about the heart of God, His justice, His holiness, and His incredible mercy. Please take some time to reflect on these themes. If you found this study meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe for more. See you next time as we follow the Israelites on their journey out of Egypt. Did you know that after one of the darkest moments in King David's life, a story of hope and restoration began to unfold? This is the story of Solomon, a name that means peace. After the heart-wrenching loss of his first child with Bathsheba, David was in a place of deep sorrow. But the story doesn't end in tragedy. The Bible tells us that David comforted his wife, and she conceived again, this time giving birth to a son. They named him Solomon. And in a beautiful act of grace, we're told that the Lord loved him. This wasn't just any birth. The prophet Nathan, who had previously confronted David about his sin, was sent by God with a new message. Through Nathan, God gave the child a second name, Jedediah, which means beloved of the Lord. Think about that. From the ashes of profound failure and grief came a child who was not only a symbol of peace, but was also explicitly named as beloved by God Himself. This moment is a powerful testament to divine forgiveness and restoration. It shows that even after a terrible mistake, God's plan of redemption continues. Solomon was unborn under a shadow of his parents' past, but under the promise of God's love. His birth signaled a new chapter, not just for David and Bathsheba, but for the entire nation of Israel. Solomon would go on to inherit the throne, becoming a king renowned for his wisdom, wealth, and his greatest achievement, building the magnificent temple in Jerusalem, a permanent dwelling place for God among his people. This was a task his father, David, had longed to do but was not permitted. The honor fell to his son, the child of peace. The story of Solomon's birth is a profound lesson in grace. It reminds us that our past mistakes don't have the final say. God can bring forth new beginnings, beauty from ashes, and peace after a storm. Solomon, the beloved of the Lord, stands as a living symbol of God's restorative power and His unfailing love that paves the way for a future filled with hope. It's a beautiful picture of how God's purposes are always moving forward, turning our deepest pains into platforms for His greatest glories. Thanks for watching. If this story touched you, be sure to like and subscribe for more. Why was Solomon chosen to be king? King David had many sons, some older, more experienced, and seemingly more qualified than Solomon. Think about Amnon, his firstborn, or Absalom, who was handsome and charismatic enough to steal the hearts of the people. And then there was Adonijah, who even tried to crown himself king. So, with all these other sons in the picture, why did the crown land on Solomon's head? It's a question that goes deeper than just simple family succession. The answer isn't just one single thing. It's a combination of divine will, a mother's promise, and Solomon's own character. Let's start with the divine aspect. Before Solomon was even born, God had already designated him for a special purpose. Through the prophet Nathan, God told David that his son, the one who would build a temple for the Lord, would have a kingdom that would be established forever. This was a divine promise, a heavenly decree that set Solomon apart from all his brothers. It wasn't about who was the strongest or most popular. It was about who God had chosen for his specific plan. David recognized this and respected it. He knew that Solomon's reign was part of a much bigger, divine story. Next, we have to talk about Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. Remember the promise David made to her, after the difficult circumstances surrounding their relationship and the loss of their first child. David swore an oath to Bathsheba that their son, Solomon, would be the one to succeed him on the throne. This was a personal, solemn vow from a king to his queen. When Adonijah made his move to take the throne, it was Bathsheba, prompted by the prophet Nathan, who went to the aging King David to remind him of this promise. She advocated for her son, not just out of motherly love, but to ensure the king's word was honored. Her courage and timing were crucial. She wasn't just a passive figure, she was an active participant in securing Solomon's destiny. But it wasn't just about God's choice and a mother's influence. Solomon himself showed qualities that made him suitable for the role. Even in his youth, there was a certain wisdom and humility about him. When God later appeared to him in a dream and offered him anything he wanted, what did Solomon ask for? Not riches, not a long life, not victory over his enemies. He asked for a discerning heart, for wisdom to govern God's people and to distinguish between right and wrong. This request pleased God immensely. It showed that Solomon's priorities were in the right place. He understood that leadership wasn't about personal gain, but about serving the people justly. This humility and desire for wisdom demonstrated a maturity beyond his years, and proved he was the right man for the job. So, when we look at the whole picture, the choice of Solomon becomes clear. It was a perfect alignment of God's sovereign plan. A king's sacred promise to his wife, and a young man's humble heart that was ready to receive wisdom. It wasn't about being the oldest or the most obvious choice. It was about being the right choice. Handpicked by God and prepared for a special purpose, to build the temple and lead Israel into an unprecedented era of peace and prosperity. The stories of his brothers serve as a powerful contrast, showing that earthly ambition and human plotting are no match for a divinely ordained plan. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most compelling questions. See you next time. Do you know what it feels like to be completely let down by someone you love and trust? That gut-wrenching feeling when a relationship shatters, not because of some small disagreement, but because of a deep, calculated betrayal. Today, we're diving into one of the most heartbreaking stories in the Bible, a tale of a father and son that will probably hit closer to home than you'd expect. It's the story of King David and his son, Absalom. Now, David wasn't just any father. He was the king of Israel, a man after God's own heart. But even the greatest among us have family struggles. And Absalom, well, Absalom was a piece of work. He was handsome, charismatic, and had a way with people. The Bible says he was perfect from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. He had it all: looks, royal status, and the love of the people. But inside, something was deeply wrong. A seed of bitterness had taken root, and it was about to grow into a full-blown rebellion. It all started with a horrific family tragedy. Absalom's sister Tamar was violated by their half-brother Amnon. And what did David do? He was angry, sure, but he did nothing. No justice, no consequences. Absalom saw this, and his anger simmered for 2 whole years. He then took matters into his own hands, orchestrating Amnon's murder in an act of cold-blooded revenge. Fearing his father's wrath, Absalom fled into exile. After 3 years, David's heart softened, and he allowed Absalom to return to Jerusalem. But he refused to see him. For 2 more years, Absalom lived in the capital, but was banished from his father's presence. Can you imagine? The frustration, the isolation, the feeling of being rejected by your own dad. This is where Absalom's pride, fueled by years of bitterness, began to poison his every thought. Instead of seeking reconciliation, Absalom started a quiet, clever campaign to steal the throne. He would stand at the city gates, the hub of public life, and intercept people coming to the king for justice. He'd listen to their problems with feigned sympathy, and say things like, "Your case is good and right, but there's no one from the king to hear you." Then he'd add the masterstroke, "If only I were judge in the land. Then anyone with a grievance could come to me, and I would give them justice." And when people bowed to him, he'd lift them up and kiss them. He was playing the part of the people's champion, the relatable leader who cared more than the distant king. For 4 years, he did this. Slowly, methodically, the Bible says he stole the hearts of the men of Israel. He used his charm, and his father's perceived weakness, to turn the kingdom against its king. His ambition had completely consumed him. He gathered his followers, declared himself king in Hebron, and forced David, his own father, to flee Jerusalem for his life. The man who faced Goliath was now running from his own son. It's a tragic picture of how unresolved hurt, pride, and personal ambition can lead to devastating rebellion. Absalom believed he was entitled to the throne, and that he could do a better job than his father. He couldn't see past his own desires to the path of humility and forgiveness. His story is a powerful warning about the danger of letting bitterness fester and the destructive nature of pride. It's not just about a prince trying to take a crown. It's about a son who lost his way, and a father who had to face the most painful betrayal imaginable. What ultimately happened to Absalom? Well, his rebellion ended as tragically as it began. But we'll save that for next time. For now, let us reflect on this. Where, in our own lives, might we be letting bitterness or pride steal our hearts? It's a tough question, but it's one we all need to ask. Thanks for joining me today. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into these timeless narratives. See you in the next video. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our series. Today, we're diving into a dramatic and pivotal moment in the story of King David, a tale of ambition, conspiracy, and the fragile nature of power. As David's reign draws to a close, the question on everyone's mind is, who will succeed him? This sets the stage for one of his sons, Adonijah, to make a bold and dangerous move. So, let's set the scene. King David is now old, his health is failing, and his strength is waning. He's a shadow of the mighty warrior who once united the kingdom. In this power vacuum, his fourth son, Adonijah, sees an opportunity. Adonijah was born after Absalom, and much like his brother, he was handsome and charismatic. The scripture tells us that David had never disciplined him, never once asking, "Why have you done this?" This lack of parental guidance perhaps fueled Adonijah's sense of entitlement and ambition. Feeling that the throne was his for the taking, Adonijah begins to gather support. He doesn't just quietly hope for the crown. He actively conspires to seize it. He exalts himself, saying, "I will be king." He prepares chariots and horsemen, with 50 men to run ahead of him, a public display of royal authority, mirroring the very actions his brother Absalom took before his own tragic rebellion. It's a clear signal to everyone in Jerusalem that he is positioning himself as the next ruler. Adonijah isn't acting alone. He strategically builds a coalition of powerful allies. He gets Joab, the commander of David's army, on his side. This is a huge deal. Joab has been David's right-hand man for decades, a fierce and loyal, albeit sometimes ruthless, general. For him to back Adonijah suggests a significant shift in the political landscape. Perhaps Joab believed David was no longer fit to rule, and that Adonijah was the strongest choice for a stable transition. Adonijah also secures the support of Abiathar, the priest. As one of the two high priests, Abiathar's endorsement lends religious legitimacy to Adonijah's claim. With the military and a key religious figure behind him, Adonijah's bid for the throne looks incredibly strong. It seems like a well-planned coup, designed to take power before David could officially name another successor. With his key supporters in place, Adonijah hosts a grand sacrificial feast at a place called Zoelith Stone, near En-Rogel. He invites all his brothers, the other sons of King David, and all the royal officials of Judah. This isn't just a party, it's a coronation ceremony in disguise. By gathering these influential men and making sacrifices, Adonijah is essentially declaring himself king and demanding their allegiance. It's a public spectacle designed to create unstoppable momentum. However, notice who is conspicuously invited to this celebration. Adonijah deliberately excludes some very important people. He doesn't invite Nathan the prophet, Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, or the elite royal guards known as the Mighty Men. And most importantly, he does not invite his younger brother, Solomon. This exclusion is a dead giveaway of his intentions. Adonijah knows these individuals are loyal to King David, and more specifically, to David's promise that Solomon would be his heir. Nathan the prophet, in particular, was the one who delivered God's covenant to David, and would fiercely protect the divinely appointed line. Benaiah commanded David's personal bodyguard, and was fiercely loyal to the king himself. Not just the military command structure under Joab. By leaving them out, Adonijah reveals that he is not just assuming the throne, but actively moving against a rival faction. He is trying to neutralize those who would oppose him. This secret coronation feast, this gathering of conspirators, kicks off a frantic race against time. The news of Adonijah's actions quickly reaches the ears of those in the palace who were left out. Nathan the prophet recognizes the immediate danger. If Adonijah successfully solidifies his power, the lives of Solomon and his supporters, including his mother Bathsheba, would be in grave danger. A new king often eliminated any potential rivals to secure his throne. So, while Adonijah and his followers are feasting and shouting, "Long live King Adonijah," a counterplan is being set in motion within the city walls. The stage is set for a dramatic confrontation between two brothers, two factions, and two competing claims to the throne of Israel. Adonijah's ambition has ignited a crisis that threatens to tear the kingdom apart, just as David's life is ending. And that's where we'll pause for today. This story is a powerful reminder of how unchecked ambition and the pursuit of power can lead to division and conflict. Next time, we'll see how Nathan and Bathsheba react to this conspiracy and how they bring the matter before a frail King David. What will the old king do? Don't miss it. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next part of this incredible story. See you then. As King David grew old, a new power struggle began to stir within the kingdom. His son Adonijah was handsome, ambitious, and next in line by birthright. Seeing his father's weakness, Adonijah decided it was his time to rule. He gathered chariots, horsemen, and 50 men to run before him. He secured the support of Joab, the commander of the army, and Abiathar, the priest. Together, they planned a great feast by the stone of Zoelith, near En-Rogel. To this feast, Adonijah invited all his royal brothers and the men of Judah, the king's officials. But pointedly, he did not invite Nathan the prophet, Benaiah, the royal guard, or his own brother, Solomon. This was no mere celebration. It was a coronation ceremony in disguise, a bold and calculated move to seize the throne before David could officially name his successor. Adonijah was making his claim, believing his moment had finally arrived. Meanwhile, the prophet Nathan, a man fiercely loyal to King David and God's will, saw Adonijah's conspiracy for what it was: a direct threat to the promise God had made. Years earlier, David had sworn an oath to Bathsheba that her son, Solomon, would be the one to sit on the throne after him. Nathan knew this promise was now in jeopardy. He couldn't let Adonijah's rebellion succeed. So, he went straight to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. He laid out the situation urgently. "Have you not heard that Adonijah has become king, and our Lord David does not know it?" He knew that if Adonijah secured the crown, both her life and Solomon's would be in grave danger. A new king would often eliminate any potential rivals to his throne. Nathan devised a plan, a countermove to protect the rightful heir and honor David's sacred vow. Nathan's plan was simple yet brilliant. He instructed Bathsheba to go to King David immediately. She was to remind the aging king of the solemn oath he had made to her, the promise that their son Solomon would be his heir. "My lord," she was to say, "did you not swear to your servant, saying, 'Solomon your son shall reign after me, and he shall sit on my throne'? Why then has Adonijah become king?" Nathan told her that while she was still speaking with the king, he himself would enter the room. He would then corroborate her story, confirming the news of Adonijah's secret coronation and reinforcing the urgency of the situation. It was a two-pronged approach, designed to stir the old king into action, to make him remember his promise and assert his authority one last time. The fate of the kingdom rested on whether they could reach David before it was too late. Following Nathan's instructions, Bathsheba went into the king's chamber. David was very old, and Abishag the Shunammite was attending to him. Bathsheba bowed low before him. The king asked, "What do you wish?" She then poured out her heart, reminding him of his promise. She detailed Adonijah's feast, listing the powerful men he had gathered and pointing out the deliberate exclusion of Solomon. "And now, my lord the king," she pleaded, "the eyes of all Israel are on you, to tell them who will sit on the throne after you." Just as she was finishing, as planned, Nathan the prophet was announced. He entered and also bowed before the king. He confirmed everything Bathsheba had said, framing it as a question. "My lord the king, have you declared that Adonijah shall reign after you?" The combined testimony of two of his most trusted advisers finally broke through David's frailty. The plan worked. Stirred from his decline, King David's resolve returned. He commanded them to call Bathsheba back into his presence. Looking at her, he made a new, powerful oath, "As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my soul out of every adversity, as I swore to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, saying, 'Solomon, your son, shall reign after me, so will I do this very day.'" David's authority, though weakened by age, was not gone. He immediately summoned Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah. He gave them clear, decisive orders. "Take Solomon, place him on the king's own mule, and escort him down to the Gihon spring. There, Zadok and Nathan were to anoint him as king over all Israel. Then they were to blow the trumpet and shout for all to hear, 'Long live King Solomon.'" This public ceremony would leave no doubt in anyone's mind who the true successor was. The conspiracy of Adonijah was about to be met with the undeniable will of King David. Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe for our next chapter in this incredible story. Ever feel like you're stuck in a rut, just going through the motions? Let me tell you about David, a man who knows that feeling all too well. David's been at his company for 20 years. 20 years of the same commute, the same desk, the same lukewarm coffee. He used to be the young gun, full of ideas and energy. Now, he feels invisible. He watches younger colleagues climb the ladder, their modern ideas and tech-savvy skills making him feel like a relic from a bygone era. His suggestions in meetings are met with polite smiles and then promptly ignored. He's not old, not really, but in the fast-paced world of his office he feels ancient. Every morning he looks in the mirror and sees a man who's settled, a man who let his dreams quietly fade into the background noise of daily life. One rainy Tuesday, it all came to a head. The company announced a major restructuring. His entire department was being reimagined. A new, younger manager, fresh out of business school, held a meeting filled with buzzwords David didn't understand. Synergy, agile, disruption. It felt like a foreign language. That afternoon, David found a memo on his desk. It wasn't a pink slip. Not exactly. It was an offer. A voluntary early retirement package. A golden handshake. It was the company's polite way of saying, "Your time is up." All night, David couldn't sleep. Was this it? Was this the end of his career? The thought was terrifying. But then, another thought crept in. A small spark in the darkness. What if this wasn't an end, but a beginning? The next morning, David walked into his boss's office, the memo in his hand. He didn't look defeated. He looked calm. He looked his boss in the eye and said, "I'm not taking the package." The boss was stunned. David continued, "Instead, I have a proposal." He spent the next 10 minutes laying out a plan he'd dreamed up overnight. A plan to use his 2 decades of experience, his deep understanding of their clients, to create a new mentorship program, bridging the gap between the old guard and the new recruits. He wasn't just defending his job. He was creating a new one, a role only he could fill. He was turning his biggest perceived weakness, his age and experience, into his greatest strength. It was a huge gamble. His boss, initially skeptical, started to listen. Really listen. He saw the fire back in David's eyes. He saw the logic in the proposal, the value that had been sitting there, overlooked, for years. He agreed to give David a 3-month trial period to launch his new program. The first few weeks were tough. Some younger employees were dismissive, and some of his older peers thought he was crazy. But David persevered. He used his warmth and his genuine desire to help, not to dictate. He started pairing seasoned veterans with bright-eyed newcomers. He created a space where experience wasn't a threat but a resource. Slowly but surely, things started to change. Communication improved. Projects that were stuck found new life. The office culture started to shift from one of competition to one of collaboration. David rediscovered his passion. He wasn't just an employee anymore. He was a leader, a mentor, a connector. He found more fulfillment in helping a young colleague land their first big account than he ever did by hitting his own targets. He proved that it's never too late to reinvent yourself. That memo, intended to push him out, became the catalyst for his greatest professional achievement. It forced him to confront his fears and decide what he truly wanted. David's story isn't about fighting against change. It's about leading it. It's a reminder that decisiveness, at any age, is powerful. It's about choosing to write your own next chapter instead of letting someone else write it for you. What decision have you been putting off? Maybe it's time to take a page out of David's book. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Have you ever felt like you were caught in the middle of a family feud? Well, imagine that feud is over the throne of an entire kingdom. That's exactly the situation we find ourselves in as we dive back into the dramatic final days of King David. David, old and frail, is nearing the end of his life. And as with any powerful ruler, the question on everyone's mind is, who will succeed him? Now, you might remember Absalom's failed rebellion. You'd think that would serve as a cautionary tale for any of David's other sons with royal ambitions. But nope. Enter Adonijah, another one of David's sons. He sees a power vacuum and decides it's his time to shine. He gathers some influential people, including Joab, the commander of the army, and Abiathar, the priest. He starts acting like he's already king, throwing a big party and inviting all his brothers except for one, Solomon. Big mistake. Why was Solomon left out? Because Adonijah knew exactly who his main rival was. King David had already promised the throne to Solomon, the son of Bathsheba. So when Bathsheba and the prophet Nathan hear about Adonijah's little coronation party, they know they have to act fast. This isn't just about family drama. It's about the future of Israel and honoring the king's promise. Nathan, being a wise strategist, comes up with a plan. He tells Bathsheba, "Go to King David. Remind him of his oath to you, that Solomon your son shall reign after him. And while you are still speaking, I will come in and confirm your words." It's a bold move, but necessary. They need to get David's attention before Adonijah's claim becomes a reality. So, Bathsheba goes into the king's chamber. She bows before him and lays out the situation. She tells him about Adonijah's feast, how he's acting as king, and how the eyes of all Israel are on David to name his successor. Just as planned, Nathan enters and backs her up, adding even more detail about Adonijah's audacity. He essentially asks David, "Did you authorize this? Because if so, we're all in big trouble." This is the wake-up call David needed. Despite his weakness, the old fire of the king ignites one last time. He summons Bathsheba back and makes a solemn vow. "As the Lord lives," he declares, "who has redeemed my soul out of every adversity, as I swore to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, saying, 'Solomon your son shall reign after me, so will I do this day.'" And David doesn't just talk. He acts. He gives clear, decisive orders. He tells them to take his own personal mullah, symbol of royal authority, and have Solomon ride it down to the Gihon spring. There Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet are to anoint him as king over Israel. Then they are to blow the trumpet and shout, "Long live King Solomon." This isn't a secret ceremony. It's a public, official, and undeniable declaration. The procession is incredible. Solomon, riding the king's mule, is led down to Gihon. Zadok takes the horn of oil from the tabernacle's sacred oil and anoints Solomon. The trumpet sounds, and all the people erupt in celebration. They shout, "Long live King Solomon." The celebration is so loud and joyous that the Bible says the earth shook with the sound. It's a stark contrast to Adonijah's self-serving feast. Back at Adonijah's party, the noise from the city finally reaches them. Joab, the seasoned military man, hears the trumpet and asks, "What's all that commotion in the city?" Just then, Jonathan, the son of Abiathar the priest, arrives. Adonijah, still clueless, welcomes him, expecting good news. But Jonathan brings the party to a screeching halt. He tells them everything. David has made Solomon king. Solomon is sitting on the royal throne, and the whole city is rejoicing. Panic sets in. Adonijah's supporters scatter, abandoning him as quickly as they joined him. His dream of being king evaporates in an instant. Terrified for his life, Adonijah runs to the tabernacle and clings to the horns of the altar, a place of sanctuary. He's begging for his life, pleading that King Solomon won't kill him. When Solomon hears this, he shows incredible wisdom and mercy. He doesn't immediately order Adonijah's execution. Instead, he says, "If he will show himself a worthy man, not one of his hairs shall fall to the earth, but if wickedness is found in him, he shall die." Solomon offers grace but also sets a clear boundary. Adonijah is brought before the new king, and Solomon simply tells him, "Go to your house." This story is a powerful lesson in legitimacy versus Adnijah tried to seize power for himself, but it was a hollow claim. Solomon's authority came from God's promise and David's legitimate appointment. It reminds us that true authority isn't something you can just take, it's given. It's a transfer of power that's done in the light, for all to see, not in the shadows of a self-serving feast. And with that, the stage is set for the glorious reign of King Solomon. Thanks so much for watching with me today. If you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next part of the story. See you next time. Ever felt like you're living in someone else's shadow? Like, no matter what you do, you're constantly being compared to a legend? Well, today we're talking about someone who knows that feeling all too well, King Solomon. Think about it. His father was King David. Not just any king, but the King David. The giant slayer, the poet, the man after God's own heart. His stories are the blockbusters of the Old Testament. David was a warrior, a charismatic leader who united a nation. His life was filled with drama, passion, and incredible highs and lows. He's the ultimate underdog story, a shepherd boy who became king. How do you follow an act like that? It must have been incredibly intimidating for Solomon. Everywhere he went, he was probably introduced as David's son. He inherited a kingdom that his father had forged through blood, sweat, and tears. The pressure to live up to that legacy must have been immense. It's easy to imagine people constantly whispering, "He's not his father," or "Can he really fill those shoes?" But here's where the story gets interesting. Solomon didn't try to be David to put. He couldn't. He wasn't a warrior king in the same way. His path to the throne was complicated, paved with political intrigue rather than battlefield victories. So, what did he do? He carved out his own identity. When God appeared to Solomon and offered him anything he wanted, Solomon didn't ask for wealth, long life, or victory over his enemies. He asked for wisdom. He asked for a discerning heart to govern his people and to distinguish between right and wrong. This single request tells you everything you need to know about him. He understood that his strength wouldn't come from a sword, but from his mind and his character. And God granted his request, and then some. Solomon became legendary not for his military conquests, but for his incredible wisdom, his wealth, and his monumental building projects. He transformed Jerusalem, building the magnificent temple that his father had only dreamed of. He established trade routes and diplomatic relationships, ushering in an unprecedented era of peace and prosperity for Israel, a golden age. While David's story is one of struggle and conquest, Solomon's is one of wisdom and construction. David fought the wars. Solomon built the peace. David laid the foundation. Solomon built the glorious structure on top of it. They were two different men, called for two different tasks, in two different seasons. So, maybe the point isn't to compare them at all. Maybe it's to see how their unique gifts complemented each other to fulfill a larger purpose. Solomon wasn't a lesser David. He was exactly the leader Israel needed at that time. He teaches us a powerful lesson. You don't have to be a copy of the person who came before you. Your unique strengths, your different approach, that's not a weakness. It might just be the very thing that's needed for the next chapter of the story. What do you think? Was Solomon's reign greater than David's in its own way? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this perspective, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. Thanks for watching.